challenge someone else.
Oh no, I was muted. I'm so sorry. This stream is scuffed. I was just saying about the ranking mode. You have an elo system. For example, the traditional elo system starts at 1,500 points, and if you win, you go up. If you lose, you go down. For example, if somebody wins a lot, he's at 1,700 elo, and he plays versus somebody who lost a little bit, who is at 1,400 elo, then the higher rated player will gain less points if he wins, but lose a lot if he loses, and it's vice versa on the other side of the team. And we won't have like an official public leaderboard, but you will know your own rating, and that's how the idea is so far for this first PvP iteration.
You will be able to directly challenge others, and Ascendant mode is the ranked mode of the game.
Yeah, we're gonna have custom match modes, custom matchmaking, so you will have an invite code, you send it to your friend who you want to battle against, and then you have a one-on-one game. First, they didn't want to include that, but then now they want to, which is great, because now we can make tournaments and have battles and whatever. So this is huge. And then we have ranked and custom as well.
So the next thing is your opponent's deck will be revealed to you at the start of the match. Now, we all already knew that, but you will be able to view that deck at any point during the battle as well. You won't have to like commit it to memory. That would be kind of ridiculous. So don't worry, there are other ways to deal with that. Okay, so the next thing we want to talk about is the legendary augment round. We'll talk about augments a little bit, and I'll have another video coming out, so don't forget to check that out. But for augments, you will have about 15 to 20 seconds at the start of the game to decide which augment you want to choose. So basically for these augment rounds, it's kind of hard to explain, but you have 4 augments pop up on the field, and they can do a lot of really interesting things. Like you could get an augment where if you give that to an alluvial, it will gain the magma trait, or if you give that to an alluvial, it will gain tsunami. Then you also have things like casting down meteors and tidal waves, and then other things that like buff the entire team and either give them lots of healing, shields, all that sort of stuff. The augments can be very, very powerful. But these legendary augments, you will only have 4 tokens, and there are 4 augments. You can split it up however you would like. So some common strategies I see playing out here are things like 3 augments on something you really want, or you really want to deny from your opponent, and then 1 token on something that you think you're going to be able to get, but then obviously that opens up your opponent as well. The other option is 1 on everything, and if your opponent goes hard on 2, then you will get the remaining 2, or 2 tokens on 2 things, to try and make sure you're guaranteeing both of them to a certain extent. So there's lots of different strategies, but basically if you both put the same amount of tokens to something, neither of you gets that legendary augment. Very, very simple. The next thing is...
just to clear that up a little bit, the legendary augments are the big augments, right? And the normal augments that we bring with our deck are changed now. They're like the common items that you have in TFT or whatever. So the normal augments will be like gain 10 damage or gain 10 armor, and you can decide. Every augment will have either choose 10 magic resist or choose 10 armor. So you can choose how you wanna have the augment look like. There's always 2 paths for 1 augment, and the normal augments you bring in the deck, they're way weaker now. They are just normal items, and they don't give you such a big buff. But then every few rounds you have this legendary augment round where you bet on, you have 4 tokens and the enemy has 4 tokens, and you can both bet on those 4 augments. So like Skoriok said, you either go maximum 3 tokens on 1 augment, you go 3 in and try to get it. If the other person also puts 3 on it, it's gonna be gone, nobody gets it. Or you put 1 token on each of them, try to get 2 augments, and that's basically the deal.
Arlen, okay, not Arlen, but the ranger that's going to be on your side of the board. Arlen's weapons and suits are invaluable. She is free to move and change her strategy at any point during the match. Why is this important? Is because the alluvials, you cannot do that. If you move an alluvial on the board, I don't think they have a set number yet, but it will cost a certain percentage, say 10 to 20% of the cost of that alluvial. So for example, if it was 10%, if you moved your 100 mastery point Ramfire from one spot to another spot, or you can do it as many times as you want during the turn, but you'll lose that cost at the end of the round, then your 100 mastery, it would cost you 10 mastery points to do that movement. Okay, so you got to be very careful. And then if you're taking it off the board, you might only get 70 to 90% of the mastery back.
Yeah, that's huge. Moving Illuvials costs something. Removing them costs something. You can't sell them for free anymore. So whatever you place, you better be sure where you place it and how you place it. In the end, you're gonna have enough mastery points to move a little bit, but it's gonna be not very efficient to move your whole team from one side to the other side. So you wanna think ahead a little bit, but sometimes you have to outplay your opponent and therefore invest a little bit in moving your Illuvials to counter his positioning. But yeah, that brings a huge strategy aspect to the game. It's really nice, and the Ranger, like Skoriok said, you can move her freely, and also the armaments that you bring for the Ranger are way stronger now. So the suits, the armor that you can put on the Ranger is gonna have stats now like crit chance or Omega power and stuff. So not only your weapon, like a dagger, is for a rogue, but also your armor with crit chance is now for a rogue. So there you have armor and weapons that will complement each other.
Again, none of these numbers are finite, but you won't get the entire cost back. But with Arlen, you don't really have that problem. You can buy and sell weapons as you choose, as long as they're in your deck, and you won't lose anything in.
Just for rebonding, you still have to pay something, right? Because you have to sell the Illuvial to be able to rebond the Ranger.
So it's very important that you play your Ranger carefully and you really incorporate them into your strategy. That's all I'm going to say there. So the other thing is how long each turn actually takes. So each turn currently, you can see 60 seconds on here, but that's because it scales into the...
I think it's so funny how it's a big thing right now that we get like cinematic color grading and less contrasty and everything, and then the one PvP screenshot that has been leaked is extremely contrasty and is really hard on the eyes. But this is obviously work in progress.
Game. It's my understanding that starts at about 40-45 seconds, and I'm not sure quite how hard it scales, but every round you probably add 5 or 10 seconds to that timer, and your round 5 or 6 might be 60 to 80 seconds or even longer than that. But the timer scales into the late game, but 45 seconds, it seems like a lot, but from what I saw, it can feel pretty rushed when you're trying to understand what your opponent's going to do and what decision you want to make. It feels tight at the time, but the pressure being added in there is going to be very important for that competitive side of the gameplay. I don't like it when there's no competition involved. So one of the last things we need to talk about is how the damage dealing works. Now, in this league here, you can see that you and your opponent both have 800 HP. We've seen in some of the other leagues that it's 1000. I'm not sure what they ended up at, but basically, how are you going to deal damage to your opponent? And it's actually a very simple calculation. Everything that you have left on the board on your side, or on the board at all, if you win that round, it's dealt to your opponent. For example, a Ramfire is 100 mastery points. If it's left alive, no matter how much health it has, it deals 100 damage to your opponent's drone. However, where this starts to get really interesting is actually with augments. If you have a 40 cost augment on that Ramfire, that will also count and it will deal 40 damage to the opposing Mozart. And from what I saw, sometimes towards round 4 or so, if you're doing really well, you're really snowballing, you can have 4 or 5 really big Illuvials and lots of augments surviving and deal upwards of like 500-600 damage all in one round. So if you're snowballing well, you will defeat them very quickly, but if the rounds are really close, the game can get drawn out quite a bit.
Yeah, from what I've seen, like the game lasts around 7-8 rounds is kind of where somebody usually dies. Between 6 and 9 rounds, I guess, is kind of what one game will look like, if not one person is completely dominating the other one. If you win every round in great fashion, you probably win in like 4 or 5 turns.
A bit, which is really, really suspenseful and really exciting. And I absolutely loved seeing those sorts of events happening. I didn't get to see too many PvP matches, but I saw enough to kind of get a gist of what was happening and how the game might play out in general sense. The other thing is that augments have completely changed, and you'll have to check that out in my next video. But basically, every single augment you play outside of the legendary augments will have one of 2 effects you can choose, and that's just how it is. There's no other secondary effects like before, but basically if you play an augment...
Yeah, we don't have the stats that you can choose anymore. So far, when we put an augment on an Illuvial, you could have chosen attack speed, or you want to give it armor, or life, or whatever it is, right? You can really fine-tune the augment. But now you just have 2 effects, give 10 armor, give 10 magic resist, or energy resist, and that's it. Which makes it a little bit easier to play, easier to understand. Maybe the really hardcore grinders won't appreciate that, but I appreciate it because this will really help for beginners to onboard them, and really it's very intuitive now. Choose this or this, boom. And it's not like choose 2 out of those 10 stats for your Illuvial, which can get really complicated. Which is a nice thing, being really complicated, but not in some of the basic features like augments. I feel like if you want to get really tactical, really complicated with some features, you want to do this in like a higher level of gameplay where not as a beginner you get in your first game and you're bombarded with all those hard choices you have to make. Those hard choices should be a little bit down the line, a little bit hidden in plain sight in the gameplay.
It might
like
heal
positioning,
your
right?
Illuvial for 100 health, or give it 100 max health. The 2 effects are usually really similar, and they will be written on the augment card, but it actually makes it really easy, a lot easier to process. Again, with that 45-second timer, you don't want too many things to do in a round, and this certainly remedies a lot of those concerns that might have come up if it had the old augment system. So yeah, let me know what you guys think about PvP. Let me know if I was really helpful in giving you insights into how the game is going to work. There's even more than that, and I will get around to videos on that as well. But I hope you guys learned something. Hope you guys are as excited as I am. We are so much closer than you might think. I've seen them play the game, no issues. We had one weird bug at the end where it would pre-calculate it, but besides that, there are no issues, and it's looking really fantastic. The strategy looks a little bit lackluster so far. Like, it was actually pretty solid once I watched a few games happening, but without being in the driver's seat, I can't really imagine how much strategy and how many mind games there actually is. Watching on the sidelines is a lot harder to see that side of things. So until I get my hands on it, I'm going to be a little bit wary on that side of things, but visually it looks great. It's a lot of fun to see what your opponent does, and there's a lot that's happening here. Have a good one.
Thank you, Scoriox. Great stuff. I'm sure you already subscribed and follow Scoriox. Always good videos. So for the mind games and stuff that we can do with, like, for all the technical aspects, for all the outplays that could be happening, there's a few things, right? You have the legendary augments, where you gotta figure out what augment does the enemy want, so I bid on that so he doesn't get it, and what augment does he not bid on so I can get a cheap augment, stuff like this. So we have this part. We also have switching positioning of our Illuvials. It costs some mastery points, but even if it's not really balanced right now, if that's the case, later down the line this will be a available option. Like, it won't be the best option to always never change your positioning, because then you have the most efficiency on the mastery points. You will have to change your positioning to outplay your opponent, and then it's when both players are positioning differently every round, then really the mind game starts. Like, if I'm going here, maybe he's there, you know what I mean. Then we also have the point where you can bring more Illuvials. The enemy will see your deck, but you could still bring a Rampfire, never play it, but then at one point you sell 2 units, bring in the Rampfire with full augments, and just surprise the enemy with a huge rogue coming into his backline, where he didn't protect his backline before because there was no rogue to protect it from. So that's a huge point that we have there as well. And also, the other point is, again, with bringing more Illuvials than you can place on the board. You bring a lot of fire Illuvials, your main deck, but then you also bring like 3-4 water Illuvials. And if you play, for example, versus Earth, and he's countering your fire, you would swap in the waters to counter his Earth and swap out the fires. So there's a lot of outplay potential that we see in there, and I'm really excited to get it going. I hope the stream was alright.